Well, experience design. Let's see the agenda for today, and it's not so big. It's actually most of the work is going to be done by you, but yeah, let's try to keep it a little bit fun. And also, I'm going to give you extra work since I think 3 weeks of working in the only one aspect, which is user research, is in my opinion is slightly too much. So I'm going to try to come up with extra concepts or extra maybe homework so you become a little bit better in experience design. So first of all, we already are familiar with our workflow in design thinking. That's the method, if you like, you are going to use in your practical throughout the whole semester. So yeah, how to get started, we're going to look into that. And if you look at the circle here, the first phase, understand, you see empathize. And yeah, we're going to look a little bit more into step number 1 of this cycle, empathize, and what does actually mean, and what are we going to do, the activities within empathize subphase, if you like. Then we're going to look into experience design is psychology, as we already mentioned in the previous lectures. So we're going to look into, you are going to look into specific psychological concepts, important ones, specifically when talking about design thinking. Of course, psychology is a super big field. We're not going to become psychologists here, but having good understanding, at least of the surface of each of these psychological concepts would be massive in the process of design thinking in when you have to design your usability in your products or services in whatever company you're going to work on later on. And then we're going to actually talk about the user research, and there are like many techniques, methods, but today we're going to just talk about survey. And yeah, that's mostly the work you're going to do this week. Actually, week 3, 4, and 5 combined into user research. So mainly what you see here is understand phase. That's what you're going to be busy with the rest. I mean, this week and the rest of let me see, week 3, week 4, and week 5. Yeah. So let's get started. And I can tell you, okay, how do you get started? Anyone? Let's do a little bit of interaction. You know, we have the circle here, the cycle, design thinking cycle. It looks like pretty organized one. And then I have this specific understanding phase. And yeah, but how do I get started? Here it says empathize as the first subphase, or the first step. And it says conduct research to develop an understanding of your users, of the user needs. So how do I do that? Is that the starting point, first of all?
Yeah, before you create a product, or you think about creating a product, you're going to decide what's your demographic, I guess.
Okay, any other opinion? No? Well, I invite you before diving into empathize, is like before conducting research about your users, is like, that's a very difficult thing to do because you normally select people and you run your techniques with them. But before that is like, what am I trying to do here, right? You think of a question, and that's called the research question. When you're investigating something, you have a goal normally. So that should be your starting point. The context and the challenge in which that, the challenge in which the context is being given. So that is step number 0, if you like. Later on, you're going to work in companies, and normally the companies establishes, by definition, they work in a specific context. Think about the big companies, Microsoft or Philips or KLM, and those working fields are specific. In those companies working in a specific context, right? Even if they are multinationals, they tend to, like Philips, they tend to work in different contexts. So, for example, could be if we take Philips, you know that Philips work in lighting. They're like pioneers in lighting, but they also are pioneers in healthcare. So those would be basically the context. And inside those that context, we're talking about problems or challenges or opportunities. So you as a UX designer working for a company, normally you move into a specific context and you are going to solve problems. So this is your step number 1. How are you going to solve, how are you going to define first that challenge? Of course, is as we saw in previous weeks, how a user experience designer moves within the fields, first of all, and also coordinates with other people in the field, like the business people, for example, the technology developers also involved in the process. And it's like your job as a user experience designer would be a little bit like a composer, if you like. You need to coordinate all those things, business goals with of course the end user's goals, and you need to balance those things. So you first need a problem, right? Having that, let me just give you, or maybe you should first give me a challenge and its context to actually get started with the design thinking process. What would be an example? Any thoughts? No one? Let me give you a context. Now I'm thinking of KLM, and that would be transportation, right? Air transport. So if I give you KLM, air transportation context, could you now think of a problem, of a challenge, of an opportunity? Would you say like, yes, I'm gonna improve this specific thing, or Could you think of a problem that they might have or may not have yet? What about this? In terms of challenge, improving the printing of the tickets, the ticket whenever you book a flight ticket, you want to print that one. And what about that process? That could be, I don't know if you are very familiar with this process. Well, KLM is not so bad at that, but many other companies try to follow, but they fail. The process of when buying a ticket in general, it is in general, or I would say in my personal experience, is not an enjoyable process. So there you go. That could be already a trigger for starting your design thinking process. I don't know, guys, if you are understanding me when I say like buying a ticket, the whole process of buying a ticket, the moment that you actually think, oh, I need to go on holiday, I need to go, holiday sounds like a pleasurable thing to do. But the moment that you think, oh, I need to pick up the country, I need to buy the tickets, I need to use, my phone is actually not so new, and this KLM app sucks, for example. I don't know if you have gotten this experience. That, well, if you haven't, I believe you have, but not necessarily with this specific context, but in general, we tend to think of a pleasurable thing, and then when we face the actual process of getting there, then that would be not so pleasurable. So those are opportunities or challenges for companies to improve, and that is how you start basically your cycle. Okay, and then you can start, of course, empathizing. Then you really have an idea. Okay, I need to select my users. They are going to be, of course, kids do not buy airline tickets. So you start shaping your users, and you start actually having a good idea who you're going to research, right? And of course, once you have that, your target groups, then you will proceed with the methods that we're going to study these weeks in order to gather information about them and how they feel, listen to them. And if you are actually improving a feature, then you're actually going to gather data about the users using the new feature or comparing the new with old feature and things like that. And that's called empathizing, user research. But okay, once we empathize, by the way, which is basically user research, we need to define those user needs, or those pain points is also called. That's what we do, empathize with the user. I just mentioned my process of buying a ticket is not so great, even though it's I'm looking forward to be or enjoy my holiday. The process of getting a ticket is often not so good and not so pleasurable. So if you can define the pain points, then you have already something to work on, something to design upon. And that is the purpose of why we're doing this the understanding phase, the user research. But first, as I said, our job is to understand the user. And when we say understand the user, we are mostly, that's why it's not a coincidence that we have the empathy keyword in the cycle. And if you look at the feeling of, at the definition of empathy, this is what we find. There are many other definitions, but they all come to the psychological aspect of it, the emotional aspect of people. And it's basically the capacity to understand or feel what another person is experiencing from within the frame of reference. So from their shoes. Well, we all know this putting on somebody else's shoes phrase, and that is actually empathy. Or if somebody sometimes is not empathetic enough, you can hear, hey, you can hear this phrase, hey, put on my shoes, like, hey, understand me. A little bit of empathy here. You can actually request that. But okay, this empathy is not an easy thing. There are books that talk about this, that go into detail about this. So it's a big topic. So as I said, we're not going to become psychologists here. But if you have the better understanding of concepts like empathy, you have, the better your design is going to be, because you are going to understand the user that is paying money for whatever you are designing. So that's the goal of it. Now I'm raising this question. Maybe it's a cultural thing. Some people believe that empathy is just encompasses a lot of emotions, and that's a physical thing. You can say that happiness, for example, when you feel happy, 3 chemicals in your body are basically being generated, and that's dopamine, oxytocin, and there's another one I forgot. It's a shame. But anyway, those chemicals, it's related. The emotion is related to only the physical aspect of it, and and then you can say there's nothing related to what you believe, or not related to the culture itself. But there are other tendencies to believe that empathy is actually, if you approach empathy with a mindset that is a cultural thing, that means, whatever you believe, your experiences in a certain community, then that could be actually, empathy could be a cultural thing. Well, I'm going to leave this question a little bit open, maybe as a curiosity. You will just look it up later and inform yourself a little bit more in depth. And what I can tell you now is I found a very nice research of the Michigan State University, and ranking countries based on who is the most empathetic and who is the least empathetic country in the world. So I would like to invite you to look at it, and maybe that gives you some insights as well. And if you feel identified or not, we will talk a little bit more. We could talk a little bit more during our practical lecture. later this week. So the reason I came to know this study is actually because I'm from Ecuador. I told you on the news up here, Ecuador, the most sympathetic country. I was not super surprised, but I was surprised that we were above Arabic countries, because if you know Arabic people, they're like super hosts. I don't know if you ever been to their houses or their countries, and they're like, like they treat you like a king, and we do a little bit of that. But in my opinion, was those guys were like, unbeatable. But surprisingly enough, Ecuador is there, so it's like, that brings some insights as well, because how much of empathy can you understand? How much of these, I don't know if I should call it virtue or adjective, you have against other people or with other people, and that's very important, because that could determine if you need a little bit more empathy, or if you don't need empathy for your specific career. If you are a UX designer, you better start training yourself in this. In this topic, and trying to develop empathy, because it's a major thing, And actually, there are psychologists that say that you can actually develop empathy. It's not an inherited thing. So you can read more about that. But anyway, everything, empathy itself, it's a big topic, but there are other big concepts in psychology. And if we are going to understand the user, what are we, people in general? Is the psyche, which means the mind. It's a big part of us, if not all. That's why we call ourselves rational, or sapiens, rational beings. So understanding the rational, understanding the brain and the psyche would be already have a major impact when designing our products in terms of user experience. Here I'm going to leave you with this concept. Is going to be a little bit of extra homework for discussion on later this week. I would like you to present or more discuss about these topics on Thursday. So behavior, perception, Hessel laws, what's motivation, attention, memory, mental models, cognitive load, and classical conditioning. Those are certain but important ones in experience design. I like, there are many more, of course, in psychology, but I'd like you to dive into it, have some definitions, do some research, and come up also with at least one example per concept. And we're going to discuss about this later. It is highly important because we are going to use the interview. Today we're going to talk briefly about service, but next week we're going to talk about interview. And interview, how to make good questions, how to interpret body language, and all that stuff has to do with mostly what we see here, the human behavior, how the user perceives things, especially when you present a new product, new features. So the more you know about this, the better UX designer you would be. Simple as that. Now, user research. Did I? Yes. The user research, well, you call it techniques, methods, whatever you want. The thing is that you have to look, or you have to gather data. That's the empathizing subphase, all about. You have to gather the data for later analysis, so you can actually identify the pain points, identify the user's needs, and therefore continue deciding your improved systems. Today we're going to talk about, these are just a few of them. We're going to talk throughout these weeks, and that's going to be your practical user research, applying different techniques. And in reality, you apply different techniques. You're never going to say, hey, I design a product based only on a survey to gather the user's data. That doesn't exist. Normally, it's a composition of using different techniques. And these are the most the common ones. So let's start talking about the survey. And what is a survey? It's basically a set of questions. That's it, written on paper. In most of the cases, and given to persons. And the goal of it is basically this one here: to gather the user's preferences, characteristics, and opinions. Yeah. So you can see that relying entirely or only on a survey is not a smart thing to do, right? It gives us some insights about the user's preferences, the characteristics, and opinions, but it doesn't give us all we need. So survey is okay, but don't rely much on it. Can you give me some examples, famous examples of where surveys are executed? Because service is not just a experience design thing. Service is a wild method technique used in many other fields, like marketing research, right? Are you guys hearing me still?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just hearing some echoing, but I don't know what that is. Okay. Guys, my point here, my bigger example here was elections, and also because in my country there will be soon elections, and everyone is crazy about service. And the polls, how the gathering of these and what they, this information and what they indicate is super important. Why? Because simply political parties take decisions based on these information, right? Even though they say like, no, they don't mean anything or this and that. The truth is that if you're a survey agency, you are earning a lot of money in this specific field, in the elections and political battles, so to say. So That's what a survey is. What are the different sections of a survey? If you have, how many people here have participated in surveys? Like sometimes you have these people stopping you on the street, right? And yeah, have you identified a little bit like the sections in a survey? Is all the time kind of these type of questions, or who can tell me a little bit more about the what you have identified in a survey if you took place? There's a quiet audience today. All right, doesn't matter. Here it is.
About the public transport in Eindhoven a couple of years ago. So it's not fresh on my mind, but I do remember that it was indeed like that they had like one section where they asked you about how do you use the public transport, like how often do you use the bus or train, and of course they ask you like what is your age, what is your occupation, are you like do you study or work, and like I think also how long you travel, but it's been a while, so I don't really remember everything of it. But
well, thank you very much, Tom. Actually, you remember the questions specifically. That's a lot of. We can digest that for a moment what you just said. And indeed, if we can have these, thank you for that example. That's a very nice example. Typical surveys questions. So in a survey, you can just decompose the or divide the survey into sections, and you will always find these three things: introduction, screening questions, and the core questions. Actually, well, conclusions I don't tend to see these often. And the thank you message. Yes, you see there. Conclusion could be just your participation allow us to improve feature X of this product Y and so on. But maybe a little bit of input. But normally I don't see these conclusions in surveys out there. So as you say, Tuan, one of the questions were how frequent you use transportation, or the train transportation, something like that, right? If I have to ask you guys, that specific question is a screening question or a core question. What would your answer be? Why does that matter? What? Yeah. Can you give me a little more of insight? Are we talking about a screening question? Or are we talking about actually a core question of the service, the transportation service in this case? Or maybe let me take another different question, because that could be a little bit more difficult. So you also, Tuan, said, you correct me if I'm wrong. You said there is are you a student? Or you work in an office, something like that, right?
Yeah, I think there was a question about what occupation.
Exactly.
So that basically, means either you can put student or work in the same question, basically.
Yes. So yeah, that's a good question. Like, if you had, Tom, maybe you can help me. If you had to tell me that's a screening question or that's a survey question, what would you say?
I'd say it's a screening question because it's you're establishing basically the demographic of basically what is well, not really audience, I don't think that's the right word for it, but basically trying to find out who is answering this survey, what group do they belong to.
Yeah, exactly. One of the most important things, and that brings me actually to the how to do a service. And one of the things, actually, you could say identifying your audience, Tom. So that's not a problem. But that's what we actually want. Don't waste your time by just putting there all the answers, and in the end, asking if you are an older than 18 years old. It's like, then what if it's not? If you're not in your user target, you're not considering minors. So that would be a waste of time, not only yours, but the person being filling in the form. So those are screening questions, and normally that's the first section of it. We will talk a little bit more of demographics in a moment and more examples. But that was a good one. So how do you normally do the survey? That's a pretty straightforward. Actually, Ton already explained briefly in a practical way how you do that. But it's if you want, these are the stages in which you define the questions, create the survey, test the survey, and then only then you launch the survey. And if we look at define the questions, this is the most difficult part. Okay, define the questions basically is come up with the questions that you're actually going to the users going to read and answer for you, so that you can actually gather the information that you need. And gathering the information is not an easy thing. So defining a question, like how do you know a good question is a good question? How do you know that a question is not being biased? How do you know that a question is not influencing the user? So you should think of all those, and it has to do with the psychological aspect and the concepts that we previously mentioned. And that's why I would like you to dive into those concepts, and then we play on in the lab on Thursday. Okay. So think about those concepts while defining your questions. And remember, you have screening questions and the core questions. We will talk in the next slide about those. Then creating the survey, how I'm going to do that? Well, you can just print in Word. You can just work on the questions and print out. Go to Eindhoven City Center and start asking people to fill those forms in. That's normally the survey process. Nothing really wow or hidden in here. So, but of course, we are in the ICT field and creating mostly digital products, and technology is just amazing. So things like Google Forms, these are the tooling that you can use for creating the forms and and even examine or just execute your service. Now, an important thing, and that is also personal experience here, the testing of the survey. That I don't see it in serious surveys. Of course, this is a must do before you actually launch the survey, and that means executing the survey. But the testing of the survey, in even in some marketing research of a product of a let's say a small size company, they tend to be a little bit reckless here. And because they say like, no, I just copy from other good questions on the internet or the templates, and I just immediately launch the survey with the users, and that's a massive mistake. Because I remember in some years ago, 7-8 years ago, I was trying to find my own company, and I was like very excited, and we had to do our marketing research, go and talk to the users, and finding out actually the needs of the users. And we have, of course, plenty of mechanisms. One of these where we use as well, like the survey itself. And we had a question related to, I don't exactly remember what the question was, but it was related to the prototype, the visual aspect that we had designed. So it was a usability test, and immediately after a survey. And I had experienced, that was very, very, I was angry when I identified that, because of the usability test, and that's time consuming. You prepare well for that, and suddenly you run the survey, and you find that the users is like, what do you mean by this question? What do you mean by this specific word? Because it was one word in the visuals, Hesta law, for example. And 90% of the people in the survey was not understanding the question. Not that they didn't want to answer the question. And but we failed miserably, because instead of picking up an easier word, we just wanted to present ourselves like so professionally, finding this difficult to understand wording. So the actual mistake in the survey was the word choice. So for example, I'm telling you the Hesta law here. How many people out there know about Hesta law? So that was a stupid mistake of our side. And that happened, of course, because we didn't test the survey. We just, created the survey, the questions defined, and then we thought it's like, we are ready, and launch it. Of course, we didn't have much time, but we launched it, and we had this problem. And in the end, of course, I was angry. That's not the way of doing things. Luckily, the other questions were fine. We could still gather some good data, So very, very fundamental phase here is test your survey. And this is a very important one, but a lot of people just dismiss this phase or this stage. So don't do it. And then you just, based on that, you clarify the questions, you redefine your questions, and then you're ready for launching. How you do this? You can have a moderated way of doing this, or just free form. And you can use technology as well for that. We have, in the end, as usual, I put the WEBLIOGRAPHY, in which you can find extra tools for how to spread and execute this kind of service, especially when you are dealing with a lot of users, If it's not a secret, Google actually does the so-called A/B testing, and then run some surveys, and those surveys are thousands of people and per country or around the world. They are being evaluated, tested, and but they were talking about thousands of people around the globe. So, but they still are kind of a portion of the whole set of users. So before they release something globally, officially, they tend to launch for a specific sample of users, and that's how you normally do when you launch a survey, because it's impossible to approach, and that's not exactly what you want, especially when you have a system in place that all the users already start dealing with these new features or whatever you are thinking of in the next version of it. So that's normally the process. So I said nothing weird here. Do not skip this one. I learned the hard way. So let's get back to the questions, to the examples, to the practical approach. How would you do things? And maybe we can use your own experiences as well to define good questions, bad questions, or just to pinpoint empiric research that you have done or you have experienced. So we talked about the screening and the core questions. So in the screening, you have demographic. Tom already told us about this. We have this survey, and we gotta find out first a little bit of the profile of these people. So the first section, normally in the first section, is where you shoot these kind of questions. So if you are having questions about age, location, actually frequency, that would be a good type of screening questions. And only then, if the profile is kind of, you can work in a semaphore with a semaphore. It's giving you green. It's like, okay, based on the answers. Like, for example, I'm not gonna target minors at all, and the age is there 16. And that's kind of what we're trying to do in the screening section. Now, the most important questions, of course, will be the ones that actually deal with whatever product, feature, service you're designing. And here I would like to ask you examples of these whatever survey you were taking part of, or you created, or your experiences, or just your thoughts. What could be a question here? Just give me first the goal, whatever you're designing. For example, you can take the scenario, the KLM scenario, printing the ticket, or improving the onboarding experience of the users. Okay, guys, let me just maybe ask a question. Let's say we have a system, and now we are trying to design we have a feature, and now we have in the making the improved version of that feature. Do you think it would be a good question if I ask the user in a survey, as simple as that, do you think the improved version of feature X is better than the previous one? Think about that question. Is it a good question to put in the survey or not?
I think it will be a good question.
Yeah? Why do you think that? Let me see your name.
Because it gives you a feedback of your improvements and things that you've done to maybe to improve the future.
But
you know in your right way.
Yeah, definitely lets you know something. That is out of question because that's happening. However, before telling you my thought, is there any other person thinking that's a good question or a bad question to put in a survey or ask?
Well, I don't think it's a really good idea to ask this question because if I want to just get more information about my product, I'll just ask about the current product, the improved one. Is it good or is it bad? Why is it good? Why is it bad?
Now we're having a debate here. Like, is it good or is it bad? I hope you have this start seeing that coming up with good questions is not an easy thing. I mean, making a survey is relatively easy, but when defining the questions, then the problem starts. Because you don't need to be biased. You don't need to influence people with your within asking the question. So you gotta be as neutral as possible. Reality is that when you everywhere you look, psychology is all around you. So that's kind of the challenge here. It is not a good question, and let me tell you why. It's along with what Martin is saying. First of all, in my sentence, in my question, I am trying to I am getting the user's opinion. That's my goal. But however, I'm influencing indirectly or directly his opinion about it because of the word improved. So if something is improved, you associate that word with something better. And if I say, what is better, this old version or this improved one, you're more likely to say, yes, this improved version in the new system. And that's what you want to avoid. So things like that, I want you to be critical when you're composing your questions. Is that clear? What I'm trying to explain?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Okay, I hope for everyone. So things like that you should totally avoid. Always try to find out the most neutral way. Sometimes it's gonna be just impossible, but try to be as neutral as possible in your questions. But don't worry, we will attempt once creating a survey, and explaining these things. But next week we're gonna talk about interview, and that's what's coming up. And we're gonna talk more in detail about good questions, examples of that, and good questions. And I would actually encourage you to bring your insights, your own thoughts and examples, what a good question is and what a bad question, examples of that. I think we talked enough about the concept of the survey. That was the major topic of today. I hope you are going to create your surveys specifically with the sections that we mentioned here, and I really hope that you pay great attention to how the word choice in your questions, how to actually construct neutral questions so you don't influence the user. And for that you need psychological questions, and for that you need to look into those concepts that I put it into slide number 7. Okay, this will make you just aware of what to ask, how to ask, and what not to ask. Okay, guys, now do you have any questions or any stories or any experiences regarding surveys? Well, if you don't, let me just add as a final word that it's and this is I learned also this a bit the hard way, and it's not that I am a marketer or a marketing researcher or such like that. No, I'm not nothing like that. But when you start, in this crazy path of entrepreneurial ideas and all that, then you gotta be an all-arounder, and you find these things that you must do, of course. And one of the things is like very annoying is that when you are approaching people, and perhaps that's also your own experience, when people are executing a survey, the answer is basically the default answer is no, I don't have time for you. I don't have time for this. So you gotta be also creative, and yeah, how you're gonna execute that specific survey, how you're going to convince, persuade people to actually collaborate with you, because you have to gather some data, you know. And yeah, those are also important aspects that normally I don't see in surveys, how to when educating yourself about surveys. But that's reality. Yeah, it's you know, it's you gotta work throughout rejection as well. You know, like it's not trying to put the blames on the user, because nobody actually kind of likes to be interrupted and bothered with maybe not even relevant questions from my perspective. You know, I'm not going to change. Maybe I just I want to help you, but even then I would not have much time and I would not collaborate. So be prepared for that and be creative. Be very, very creative. There are ways, very specific ways we will learn, and I will tell you my own experience as the weeks pass, how to approach in creative ways so that people are way more willing to collaborate with you. As simple as inviting them for a coffee, for example, would make a total difference, and you will gather way more data. So think about those aspects as well. But I'm going to push you a little bit during the present, during the practical. So we're going to do a little bit more in action, all that. Yeah, I'm talking, of course, about moderated service in which you are standing in front of the user with a paper, pen, and making notes and asking the questions, or even just observing the user filling in the form. Okay. So that has been it. This is the WEBLIOGRAPHY. Don't forget to check. And thank you.